welcome to the Do Nothing podcast. I am so grateful to you for doing this with me at your beautiful headquarters in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm happy. Oh, I'm happy to be home.
Happy to be home.
Nice to have you at our place,
Yes,
always.
Thank you. And you are coming to us with a foot that is on the mend.
Yes.
What happened to you?
I fell on a staircase in a German castle. Really?
Did you really?
Yeah.
Well, if you have to, is your foot broken?
No, there's an ankle broken. The little bone on the outside of your ankle,
Uh-huh.
the little knob at the bottom of the fibula,
Yeah.
that's busted off.
Okay. So if you had to do something like that, the best way to do it for a story would be to have it be done in a German castle on the stairway.
Absolutely. I was at a dance festival, seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't do it dancing, but I had a really great time before, and the Germans are so nice. Everyone helped me. They carried my bag. They, if they saw me get up to try to get some water in the cafeteria, they would say, "Sit down. What can I get for you?" And so I had a really good time before and after the ankle incident.
Well, you got catered to after.
Well,
It was like you were double famous.
yeah, after a while, I said, really, I just did it to get attention. Nobody believed me.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think we were talking a little bit before, but I always like to ask my guests how they get started in the morning. And my way of getting started is to start the morning and do nothing, which is my meditation routine, my 45-minute routine in the morning. But that's just what I do. And I'm curious what your version of do nothing is.
I think it has a lot to do with the snooze button, actually. I check in and see am I well rested, actually. And if I am, then that's great. I can get up. If I'm not as well rested as I would like to be, and I have the luxury of sleeping more, then I do. And my schedule is pretty flexible as far as work goes. And I luxuriate in my hot shower and my cup of coffee, which I like to sit and hold and smell, and my 2 slices of wheat toast. So I feel like my morning kitchen ritual is kind of a thing that gets me ready, because I have this sense of deja vu every morning, because I really do the same thing. I get cleaned up and I go in and I measure out the more than 1/4 cup of coffee. And I put the coffee stuff all together, and I get the same toast, and I put the same amount of butter and the same amount of sugar and the same amount of cream, and then I sit in my kitchen.
Interesting. How long does that take in the morning?
Well, if I have time to luxuriate, I'll spend an hour.
Okay. And how much sleep do you need?
These days, sometimes you need 12 hours and sometimes you need 7 hours. So it depends on what I've been up to be honest.
Whether you've been out dancing or doing it up the night before? Okay, I got you. So
if I'm in a little sleep deprivation.
Yeah. Or just busy with stuff.
Yeah.
You said you set your alarm. Do you have a time that you generally set it for? The same every day, or does it?
Oh no.
Does it have to do with how many hours you're hoping to get?
You know what? When I need to do something, then I plan. But I am a pretty spontaneous person, and I roll pretty freely. I'm not that routinized. I like to have time for my morning, but I'll cut it short. So I think I don't feel like I'm as deep a mental yogi kind of person as other people, because I'm pretty freewheeling in lots of ways. Some people call it improvisation. However, as I've gotten a little older, and I think after the retreat, even
The do nothing retreat.
the do nothing retreat on
right.
which I went to last April, I'm more aware, and I'm more aware of how I need to be here at the Tileworks, especially. I haven't always been super aware of how I come across. And it's taken me years to figure out that my words have 10x power around here, because I don't think of myself as a big, tough, fancy, powerful person. So in a way, I'm more powerful than I realize. And so it's taken me years to sort that out, but I'm beginning to get the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more careful now about the state I'm in when I show up. And I'm more careful to get out or not come in when I can tell I'm a little more on edge, maybe not as well rested, because then my decisions will not be as good.
Mm.
So I went to bed early, and I planned for this morning.
Thank you. I did too. And I slept well, so that was helpful.
Me too.
As we get later in our years, I've noticed that sleep makes a huge difference. And it's interesting because you say like you can be a little bit freewheeling, and when I think of creative people like
Mm-hmm.
yourself, I have that picture. Yet you have structure in your life, like even when you're talking about the morning routine.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty solid structure you got there. So where does that come from for you?
The structure?
Yeah, kind of those.
There's like a blend of spontaneity and structure.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I guess I've noticed there's some things that I do. And I've noticed what calms me down. And they're not normal things. I mean, I can do a little breathing, I'll do a little headspace, but if I'm hanging out in the evening and I'm jumpy or something, I like to do things with my hands. And there's so I'll do nothing, but I'll be doing needlepoint with my hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done lots of needlepoint, hundreds of hours of just and relaxing. And actually what I find is that that actually does not put me to sleep. It's restful, and I end up feeling more energized. So I'll put down the knitting or the needlework, and I'll feel more awake. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Another thing I do is I've taken up mosaic. I've fallen in love with mosaics, which is completely different than this tile.
Okay.
And because my approach is not planned, with these pieces, I'm planning, I'm agonizing over every little curve and everything else. But in mosaic, the approach I'm taking is I'm just kind of doing things in a moment. I'm making something that looks right. I'm not planning the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So it's completely different kind of thinking. And I get to play with, beautiful shiny glass, shiny objects. As we talk about in business.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to watch out for shiny objects, but sometimes they're good.
Well, this is a safe way to come in contact with shiny objects.
I like that. And it's physical.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that feels really good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where do you think you got this contrast from? Like, were your parents, was one real organized and one was kind of more artsy or creative, or what were their personalities?
Yeah, that's
like?
an interesting question. I mean, my father was a scientist, so presumably there was some order there. But he was Egyptian. He was very much into his kids. It was all about the kids and enjoying. My mother's the craftsperson in the family. My dad's taste was really bad.
What does that mean?
Well, it's just funny. So if you go into like his siblings' houses back in Egypt, so they're fairly simple places, but there's this Rococo furniture and things in there that just seems really garish in relation to what I would think fits the place. I'm looking for Danish modern, and it's curly cues, and maybe they match. And when my dad puts things together, it's funny.
Okay.
We don't let him decorate. But my mom is always doing things with her hands. She can knit a sock with her hands behind her back, I'm sure.
No kidding.
But she's always taking up different things too. So she, in a way, I think. I don't know if you would say she gets bored easily, but she gets it and she's ready to move on to another thing. And I feel like I'm a little bit like that. Once I've got the T-shirt, I want to move on to the next thing.
The T-shirt is symbolic of.
It's like, been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Just got to make sure I was following.
You were.
What was the household like growing up?
Oh, noisy and active, because I'm one of 5 children. I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest of
Yeah,
5.
and the boys were always wrestling and doing things and, doing big time wrestling in the living room. So it was really active, and we played with each other all the time. We played endless games of Monopoly and Solitaire and run around the block. And, the best days ever were those summer nights when you could stay up pretty late. Maybe the grown-ups were socializing, and we would, the 5 of us and a couple neighbor kids would play, what do you call that game? Bloody Murder.
Oh.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
It was just tag. It was a tag that you played around the house. But, those are top moments in childhood.
Yeah, good memories. Your dad is an immigrant here from Egypt. And he, if I read correctly, he met your wife at Michigan State.
That's right.
Yeah, Michigan State University.
My mother there, yeah.
Or excuse me, your wife. Yeah. Hello.
It's catchy.
Your mother. Yeah. So they went back, but they weren't happy there, and they ended up settling
They
here.
really
in America.
couldn't make it financially.
Okay.
Yeah, and they kind of snuck back. And my father, since there was a window of time when the U.S. was welcoming foreign educated people with open arms, and when they came back in '68 was one of those times.
Wow.
So he had no problem coming into the country, even saying he's coming forever. And then, but he did owe a debt to the Egyptian government, which he left before he could finish working as much as they wanted, because the conditions were really poor.
Okay.
And so he could not go back for about a decade. And then at one point, President Sadat at the time gave amnesty to those professionals and had a conference where they could go back to Egypt. And he went then, and then started going every year to visit his family again.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And while he was here, he eventually, or at some point, was working, was it for Gerber Foods?
That's right.
And is that the baby food company?
It's the baby food company.
Wow. So, and he was director of foods or something?
Right. So they moved the family to Fremont, Michigan, which is where Gerber Baby Foods was headquartered. Kind of a one-horse town. That's the big employer. And he worked in the research department, eventually became director of research. And I used to joke with him about, he couldn't use sugar or salt in the baby food, of course. So he was always salting stuff at home like crazy. And the food, his food was good, and he would sometimes bring us back the experiments in baby food, and sometimes they were interesting.
So essentially, for those of us that have kids that, in like my kids are in their 20s, and I don't really remember, to be honest with you, but I feel like we probably fed them Gerber baby food or something.
Probably fed them rice cereal.
Or something like that, right? So not only did your father have some hand in likely what we were feeding our kids, you may have as well, because you were tasting some of it.
Could have been.
It's all like connecting here. This is nuts. Did you ever think about that?
Not till now.
Everybody that you're coming into contact with that had Gerber, your families maybe had some sort of hand in it.
Blueberry cobbler.
That's right. Is that an actual flavor for the kids?
I think it is.
Okay, that sounds good. So your dad, was your mom stay-at-home mom, or did she work? Or?
So she was stay-at-home. Staying at home with 5 kids is working
Sure is.
pretty hard.
Yeah.
I'd say.
I would agree.
And although she was always, I would say, a little bit restless. She went to American Association of University Women meetings, AAUW. She was very... She felt super strongly about women's rights and equal pay, and didn't experience that in her career, of course. And she very strongly wanted me to... She said, "You could be anything you want in the world, honey, but please, don't be a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher. because those were the three like safe female roles at the time, at least for her, coming out of college with a humanities degree. And so really, not that there's anything wrong with those professions, of course, but that was her way of saying, be what you want to be. Don't feel like you have to fit in the standard roles for women. And that goes way back. I don't know how young I was when she started saying things like that, but I definitely got the message loud and clear.
Did you have a sister as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, or do you have a sister?
I do.
And did she get that message like you did in the same way?
Her.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. And what about your brothers? Did they pick up on that from her in the same way?
Well, in our house, it was understood that you were going to college. It was just understood. There was no question about whether you were going. There was a question about where you were going to go. It was just understood. Education was super important to my father and my mother.
Were you named in some way after your father? Because your names kind of rhyme, Nawal and Kamal. I wasn't sure if there was some sort of correlation.
No, they're both really everyday Arabic names.
Okay.
Lots of Kamals out there.
Okay.
And in Arabic, my name is spelled N-W-L, Nawal.
Nawal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you hear an Arab say it, it sounds different.
Okay, we say it
Noel.
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They say Noel, and they curl the L around.
Okay.
No, my dad, I asked him what my name meant, and he tells he told me and my sister both that our names meant beautiful princess.
What's your sister's name?
So I don't really believe it. Hala.
Hala.
Yeah.
Okay, and they both need beautiful princess. Does he have an accent?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Are your parents still with us?
My dad is not.
Okay. Okay. And your mom is, and do you see your mom?
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
frequently.
she comes to town.
Uh-huh.
She's got a place in town here in Ann Arbor.
Okay. And does she still live in Fremont?
No, they left Fremont 20 years ago
Okay.
and moved to a house on the Muskegon River.
Okay.
So,
And then she also has a place here in Ann Arbor, is what
Yeah.
you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. And what were you like as you got into those influential years, like when you were a teenager and in high school and things like that? What kind of kid were you at that point?
oh, tortured,
Okay.
definitely. But I was deeply into my art. I was very much a pleaser. Really wanted to get really good grades. Put a lot more pressure on myself than my parents ever did, actually. And I was also very active. I've always been active into sports and things like that. So I did sports. I did theater. I was always doing things. So when one sport didn't work out, I moved to another sport,
Yeah.
So basketball, then cross country and volleyball, maybe theater. So I was always doing something after school.
Were you competitive when it came to those things, or did you just do it for the, for enjoyment?
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah, I would
competitiveness
say-
isn't an enjoyment, but some people they thrive on that competitiveness.
Yeah, I am not that competitive.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, too bad. My teammates would have appreciated it.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's funny, I realize now, the only thing that I'm really competitive about is press for my company.
Interesting.
It's like, I want the press. So they're talking about some other tile company, I think, talk about us.
That's funny you say that, because when you said you weren't competitive, I thought to myself, wow, that's interesting. I haven't noticed that in business, though. You seem competitive in business to me.
Well,
Not in a
me
healthy
pleasing
way.
my own self and feeling, doing as well as I can do. No, you're right though.
I've known you a while, so I picked up on a few things.
I would think
And
of
I think it's
of
there.
it as ambitious.
Ambitious? Okay. We can use that term if you want.
If there was anybody I considered competition,
Yeah.
I would be.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so you're doing sports. Were you a good student?
Oh, I was.
Yeah.
I had to work, but I was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember your grade point?
Oh, it wasn't quite 4
Yeah.
because of, algebra and chemistry. In high school? Yeah. Something like that.
It was high grade point.
Oh, yeah.
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 Obviously, because you got into the University of Michigan, which is not an easy thing to do.
That's what they say.
Yeah. To this day, still not.
Yeah.
So, Okay, and you said you were tortured. So inside, I'm guessing maybe that's what you're
I
referring
would
to?
say, yeah. I mean, so I had, teenage girl stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was worried about how I looked and how to fit in. Because I'm not so much like other people. I mean, I'd like to think I'm totally normal, but the evidence is mounting to the contrary.
When did you figure that out?
10 minutes ago?
You just figured it out 10 minutes ago? When you were explaining how you butter your toast? I'm just kidding. So. Yeah, so did you realize that in high school? Because sometimes in high school, kids don't necessarily know they can't connect their feeling to what's going on.
I would say that would be accurate.
Okay. And I mean, if depressed is too much of a strong word, but do you feel like you had were you like kind of dark in some ways, when you got home and stuff?
Definitely.
Did your parents pick up on it? Or?
Oh, yeah.
They did? Oh.
My mom, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'd say, I feel terrible,
Okay.
Sure.
So you would share your feelings with her?
I would share,
okay.
yeah.
What kind of things would she tell you?
Basically, don't be so hard on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the message, because I was hard on myself even back then.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't be perfect, and I think actually perfectionism, which we all know, the more I learn about it, the more I realize how insidious and harmful it can be. But I mean, it has two sides, right? And I feel like I'm perfectionist, and I'm gaining control of that, because of course the useful side means I'm fussy about what happens with the business, and I got an idea, and I want to make things happen in a certain way, and I got to, I have a clear vision. I want to get there.
Yeah.
And when I'm designing a tile, I'm fussing around with it and looking at the piece and saying, this isn't quite right. This isn't quite right. This isn't quite right. Until I get it, because I know that when I get a tile right, I notice the difference, and it sells better, because it just is better. But of course, perfectionism when you're dealing with other people, clearly it can be really difficult. So if I expect so much of myself and I can't even quite measure up, I'm expecting things of other people. If they don't stand a chance. So you got to be careful. And I'd say just in the last few years, I've started to really recognize that perfectionism, and when I need it and when I need to tell it to calm down.
You recognize it.
I do a lot more.
Was there a perfectionism in your household growing up, or was there a feeling of that?
Oh,
Where do you think that came from?
It came from inside of me, definitely.
Maybe trying to gain control of something, or what do you think? I heard you say something like that, but...
I don't know about control. I think I just wanted to fit in with the other girls.
Okay. So where do you think this perfectionism piece of you, do your siblings have any part of that, or?
I don't know. I'd have to ask them that question. I mean, three of the five of us were very accomplished students in high school. And at least one of us, the eldest brother, is just really, really great at school and studies, and he made it look easy. I don't think it was necessarily. We'll have to ask him. I think high school wasn't so hard for him.
Okay.
He didn't have to study. He just really understood things. He's really good on the left brain stuff, but he's also really calm and just steady in a way that I'm not.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but I'm the one that wants, when we go to Mom's house, I want to do stuff. I don't want to just loaf. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a bike ride. Let's do something.
Yeah.
I'm a don't
Your
like to
energy.
hold still kind of person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Always have been.
Yeah, on the go. Yeah, you have a lot of energy. I've noticed that over the years, more than I do. We'll have to be at a meeting at the same time, but you'll be out till 1:00 in the morning. I'm in bed at 9.
Yeah. Well, I'm not running 6 miles in the morning either.
Okay,
we just use our energy in different
different
ways.
When you got into the University of Michigan, were you excited about that? And also, you were an art major, right?
I went into art school. Initially, it was very provisional in my mind. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go into art school, and if I don't like it, then maybe I'll go do economics.
Okay.
Seriously.
Wow.
Those were the things, that's what was in my mind. I'll see what I think of this art school thing. Because you don't really know what you're going to do anyway, going into college.
Yeah.
So,
and you had that perspective?
That was
kind
my
of like,
perspective
I have an open
in.
mind, I'm going to see what clicks for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I did well. I decided to stay, but then after a semester and a half, I grew really disenchanted with art school. I began to, the impression I got from my classes and critiques was that it didn't really matter how good, how technically excellent your work was. Basically, if you could tell a story and make it sound impressive, then it would be good. And that idea grated on me then, and it caused me actually to say, wait, the only way to really succeed in this fine art business is to, it's really just selling with the mouth. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really matter how good the piece is. And that gave me nothing to grab onto. So what's good? I felt like it was too subjective, and I could not operate in that field. And there was no way, unless I, was very close to a critic or something, personally, that I was going to succeed. Because I don't like spinning those kinds of yarns. That's a lot of style without substance. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't do it, so I dropped out.
Interesting.
Yeah, I dropped out of college, and I decided I would rather be outdoors. And so I want to make my living leading outdoor trips. And so I dug around, researched, and I found, basically created an education where I could learn how to get closer to that. Mm-hmm. So I found a school where you lived outside all the time. You rode around the country on a school bus. And the only major was environmental education. And I went to that school, and it was fascinating, outdoors, a little crazy head trippy. Surprise! Mm-hmm. And so that didn't really work out so well either. Mm-hmm. And then, so within 2 years, I was back at art school.
Were you at that school for 2 years?
No, I went for 1 school year.
Okay.
And said, well, that's not quite the right thing. And I went to Outward Bound.
Oh, yeah.
And took a semester in their, they have a semester collegiate credit program. Mm-hmm. For basically to teach you to work with youth at risk. Mm-hmm. So that was totally fascinating. Criminal justice, behavior. I was still pretty young. So I got done with that. It's, wow, I can do these amazing things. I was running really far. Mm-hmm. I think I ran 18 miles once.
Wow.
I know. I was close to marathon.
Yeah.
I know, yeah. And then, but then I kind of went home after that and took stock of my credits and how long my parents were actually going to pay for college for me with 4 kids behind me. Yeah, and they said, great. Well, I need to finish a bachelor's. And I went back to art school.
When you left and went on the school bus tour, what was the name of that school?
It's no longer around, but it's called the Audubon Expedition Institute.
What did your parents say?
Well, I'm sure my dad was distressed, but he was distressed about art school too. Okay. I didn't hear about that until 2 years ago. Oh, wow. My mom said, oh yeah, he was a little nervous about art school. So I can't imagine. They paid for the tuition on the bus school, you know. I can't even imagine. I think they could see that wasn't really good for me. So 1 year and out was good with that.
It's interesting they let you kind of figure things out.
They really did.
They didn't put pressure on you because you said they paid for it.
Yeah. And
so they didn't put any kind of pressure on you or anything.
Amazing people, huh?
Pretty neat. Yeah. And pretty cool situation for you to be able to do that. When you were in high school, did you have an artistic you'd mentioned sports and theater, but were you doing art there as well? Okay.
Yeah, no, art and I discovered each other in 7th grade.
Okay. And what types of art were you doing?
Well, in 7th grade, you're just playing with media, but actually, I still have my notes from 7th grade art class, because the teacher was fantastic. Her name is Jane Vitek, and she taught us the elements and principles of design in a very organized way. I took my notes, their color, line, form, etc., balance, rhythm, harmony, and I never in another art class got those taught to me again so clearly. Never again in high school and college. But that was my grounding. And so, and that's still the root of it. So I still have the notes. I wrote them in brown marker on paper. I kept the notebook. And they still resound. So I started, I did some drawing, and my art teacher said, there's something there, and fix that. And but she, as soon as she saw me try to do something, she said, Jane realized there was something in there. And so she paid pretty close attention. And I remember going through some interesting learning times. I was trying to make a sculpture one time, and I kept adding things, trying to make it better. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And the lesson was, that the things I was adding weren't unified. They weren't adding to the idea at all. So, and eventually I scrapped it. And that was a great learning experience. So you have to go through things like that when you're learning to make art.
Is Jane still with us?
She's around.
Have you ever...
I've seen her since.
Yeah, and you've spoken with her, and she knows what you're up to?
Yeah. In my hometown, Fremont, the art center there, which my mother helped create, they had a Motawi show. Oh, cool. So I came back and I gave a talk, and I got to see Jane and maybe even my high school teacher. It was really sweet.
Does Jane know the impact that she had on you?
I think she might actually. I keep telling her.
Oh, if you told her, then she should know. Yeah, that's pretty neat. In high school, did you have any influential teachers?
I was really interested in I had a couple of professors that were teaching a class called American Trends, 20th Century. And I was fascinated by them and the work. But this thing happened. So we took this class. It was sort of this fancy senior-ish class, 2-year-long thing. And it's in my junior year. It was the first year. And I learned about how awful people could be. That's the first time I ever learned about corruption. And actually, it really, really depressed me. And you could see it in my artwork. You could see, it really got me down. It was just not.
Why do you think that hit you so deep, where it might not with
people
others?
Could be so horrible.
So you had a view of the world. You had a view of the world that was. It was a lighter view. You felt that people were in it together and not against each other. Yeah.
Whatever. Teeny girl stuff is nothing compared to.
Yeah.
Holy cow! You get out there and the game's rigged. What? No, that was mortifying, and I had to really. I would say that was the tough year. And then once I sort of got a hold of all that and realized all that, then I stopped doing things that drove me nuts, like going to student council meetings, because I'm an entrepreneur. We already know now that I have a strong opinion about things and how they should go. And, it was my first experience in endless meetings that didn't get anything done. Oh my God. So that was all going on that same junior year. So, I quit the student government. I quit the clubs. I let go of some of these things that were a problem. And, I guess I started to get comfortable with the idea that people can be awful.
Did when you quit all that, was that intentional? In other words, were you saying, this is dragging me down, I'm not going to do it? Or was it just I don't like this,
Oh, no. It's we have to stop doing this and this and this and this.
There's a lot of wisdom for you must have been 17.
Yeah, my mom helped.
Yeah. Oh, she did?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you talked things.
Don't do that.
Yeah, stop. That's a stop doing. There's such a thing.
If it drives you so nuts.
Yeah. You don't have to do things in life that you hate that drag you down. Wow, your mom sounds pretty special. Yeah, for sure. So you came back to Michigan. Were they excited that you came back to University of Michigan and got back into
Gosh, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
They were probably happy to see me finishing my bachelor's in something.
Uh-huh.
That's so funny. How would I, you know what, my siblings have a better perspective on those kinds of questions than I do. I was chatting with my brother about something, and while I was on the crazy bus school, he's like, well, you know, your mom would cry after she got off the phone with you. And I was like, what? She did what?
You had no idea.
How? No. And he was like holding it against me. I was like, geez, I don't even know.
Well, I wonder if she was crying because of what you were doing or because she missed
Because I ran off with my hippie boyfriend and they were afraid I was going to get pregnant. That's what...
As a parent, I can understand.
Exactly. No, I was the oldest, so, I didn't, I wasn't streetwise at all. I just, did things. And so I made the path way easier for my siblings. They couldn't do anything that would scare my parents as much as I did.
Did you experiment at all with drugs or anything like that?
A little bit with marijuana and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing major.
Nah, it wasn't my interest.
You weren't like an LSD hippie.
No, it's interesting.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm kind of curious, but no, man. I remember once I got high and I was so sick of being high. He was like, I need to get something done. Please.
Will you wear off already?
Exactly.
I got to get back to doing stuff.
Exactly.
This is not productive. The artist's mind with productivity baked into it. It's so interesting. Okay, so did you graduate with an art degree?
Yeah, Bachelor of Fine Arts,
so you
concentration.
went back into it and you accepted whatever you were learning, whether or not you believed in all of it.
I didn't worry about that. Actually, I went back with a completely different mindset.
That's great.
I went back to art school and I said, I'm going to do the fine and functional crafts and figure sculpture because I love figure sculpture and I'm good at it. So that's what I did. Completely changed. I went into fibers, I went into ceramics, and ceramics does a thing to you. If you're one of its culprits, clay really can just grab you and drag you in. And I was enamored of playing with the forms and with the glazes, especially what this molten glass can do. So I was really immediately caught by ceramics, and then became one of the gang of ceramic students who were serious, spent all their extra time in the ceramic studio. So if we weren't at class or sleeping, maybe doing some other homework, we were at the lab all the time. And that was for 4 semesters straight. So I had to finish, right?
Yeah.
So I basically went, so I took 4 semesters in a row, summer, fall, winter, summer, and finished my BFA that way, back at Michigan State.
Okay.
Yeah.
At Michigan State or at Michigan?
Sorry.
At
University of Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you started to get passionate about this.
Oh yeah.
Was the school picking up on that? Were you being recognized at all for your work yet?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a big place. You just do what you do. And I didn't matter. I had a clear eye. I knew where I was going. And
where did you think that was? You're saying to yourself, I like this medium.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would call it that, but that's what I'm calling it. And could I make a living doing this? Is that what you're saying to yourself?
I don't think I was clear on the whole make a living part.
Okay.
But finishing college and being really taken by this media and wanting to, finish college strongly and well and in time.
Yeah.
All that was really important. So I did things that I'd never done before, like get up early so I could go into the weaving studio and do my weaving in the morning when it was quiet and the sun was coming in, and then go to my 8 o'clock, other class and stuff like that. So I became very disciplined.
Wow.
In a way that was not usual for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm thinking about the I'll call it your adventure.
Yeah.
When you went on the school bus and then you did Outward Bound, And, maybe that was a time in your life where you allowed yourself intentionally or just, through circumstances to be a little bit looser.
I was exploring.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I very much was open to what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know where it would take me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember someone on the bus saying, "You're a wanderer." And I thought, well, yes. I'm 21. I'm exploring what's out there. I don't know what I want yet.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was trying different things. I thought maybe I'll be an outdoor leader. Maybe I'll at least do liaison work, logistics work for Outward Bound. I looked into doing that, where you're doing the support. Maybe you work at base camp, but you're getting the lunches and everything and just being support staff, which in that environment is great because it's very positive. Outward Bound is a really great organization.
Yeah,
So
it is.
just being there is a big thing.
I never realized you were such an outdoors person. Are you still drawn to the outdoors in the same way? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am. And I realized on that retreat, again, how much it matters. So when I was at Shambhala Mountain Retreat, during the Do Nothing Retreat, I went hiking twice a day, I think. And I walked up that mountain to the point at least 3 times. Mm-hmm. And I just realized that nature that's my happy place. Mm-hmm. And some days, and I walk around town and things too, but I prefer the woods. But some days my feeling of being alone and feeling negative about that would overwhelm, would be too strong to enjoy being in the woods by myself, which is too bad.
Yeah.
But it's a healing, nice place. Yeah. And I can, who can describe how the outdoors makes them feel in words? I can't. Mm-hmm. But there's something about the sun and the view of the woods, and if it can calm the other thoughts down.
Well, I wonder if you really are describing it, how it makes people feel, especially nowadays, because it seems to me that everybody is, we're on a speed that I don't know that we can handle, that we're capable of handling. I know many of us think we can, myself included at times. But when you get out there and there's some solitude and some quiet and your phone doesn't work or your smartphone, you can't check your texts and emails or whatever. Yeah. There's something awfully therapeutic about it. Are you able to do that here in Michigan on a regular basis? You live in the Ann Arbor area.
I live in Ann Arbor, and there's some great parks. I have some favorite walks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. The loop around Argo Pond is really pleasant. Mm-hmm. And it's part cement and public and part, just earth.
Yeah.
And I like that. If it's a good day, I get warmed up on the cement part, and then I don't really run anymore. Yeah. But I get to run it on that on the part through the woods because it just feels so good.
That's so cool.
The other escaping places is doing mosaicing. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of mosaic called crazy paving. Okay. It's basically you're trying to not let your pieces line up. So you don't want a big line of something going through this pattern. It's just everything sort of intersects and stops and stops and stops. Okay. And so just spending time making that work, maybe you have to cut a piece, and just focusing on that is a really nice mind calming thing for me. Discovered it a few years ago. And I don't really know anything much about mosaic, but it has a nice place in my life because I can't quite do nothing.
You did for 3 days.
I did.
Where do you do that?
In the house.
Oh, in your house?
In the basement.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Do you have a setup down there?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called a table.
Well, I'm picturing some, wonderful artist setup that's super special and, whatnot. No, but all you need is a table, and that's the beauty of it, and it's simple. you know. And so when you came out of college, how'd you start making a living?
Oh my goodness. You know, I remember this because I worked at Pewabic Pottery, historic tile pottery in Detroit, Michigan. Been there for 100 years. And I thought, okay, well, this is a place I'm actually suited to work by my education, making tile. And then they didn't have a full-time job, so I was working part-time doing data entry. And then I wanted to work in clay, so I volunteered back at the ceramic studio at Michigan, you know, more part-time so that I could work. So I had 2 part-time jobs and a volunteer job, and then I had time to make my art, which was, of course, terrible. Because you just can't do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Eventually, the job at Pewabic expanded to be full-time. So I worked I worked in that ceramics place making tile, and I really quickly got tired of just making tile, of hand pressing, because it was not cerebral enough. Just doing the making was not interesting enough. And I looked at what the designers were doing, and I knew that I could do that. But I didn't look professional. I didn't act professional. And, so when job openings came by, I was passed over without, the job opening was filled magically by my coworker. And I thought, well, I'm not going to go anywhere in this organization. And for good reasons. And so that's after a couple of years of working at the pottery, I tried to get my parents to send me to a graduate school program in England to learn how to have a pottery. And they said,
look, we have 4 more kids.
That's
We're
exactly.
trying to put through
They
school.
said, are you still smoking? And they said, no, why don't you just start the thing? Just start this pottery you want to start. And so what they did, and this is my mother's thinking, she's so smart. They bought a house. They made a real estate investment in Ann Arbor. They bought a house. We chose it for the garage. I got kilns going and basically started it in the garage, and paid as little rent as the IRS would really let them charge me.
Yeah.
And that's how the Tileworks got started.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
And I knew I didn't know anything about business. I went to the Service Corps of Retired Executives, SCORE, they call it, with the chamber.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
And
SCORE.
I wrote up a little something, and this was in 91 or 92.
Yeah.
Okay. So I remember taking my dot matrix printed little business plan into the SCORE people, and this fellow looks at it, and frankly, what I felt like he said was, "Whoa, that's really pretty, little lady," and he said, "That looks fine." And I said, what? That's not what I need at all.
Yeah.
Give me some reality. And so they weren't really much help at that time.
Yeah.
And all the things we have now for entrepreneurs, all those tools, all those help, all those workshops, that stuff was not around.
No.
So what I found was Ink magazine, which at the time was edited by George Gendron, whose work I loved, and that magazine just hit me squarely where I needed to learn. Month after month after month, I would read every single article, and I was reading Norm Brodsky's column in there, Street Smarts, and I saw Bo Burlingham's, some of his major pieces, including the one about SRC manufacturing that eventually, led to the great game of business, which a lot of us in the Small Giants and Do Nothing community know about.
Yeah.
So literally, Ink magazine led me to a business education because I read the magazine, I read the books, I went to the conference, and then I just started. So they took me on a learning journey about business, that I'm still on.
Yeah, me too. Do you know you're a lifelong learner? Do you know that about yourself? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. I think I've always thought this about you, and when I think I'm probably just making generalizations about artists in general, in that it would be difficult for an artist to be a good business person. And because they're so creative, and I just have this picture of, they're creating and they don't have time for the this and the that and all the like stuff that you have going on around here at your facility. Yet what I've witnessed with you over the years is that artistic piece, but also this consistent drive to learn how to do your business better each and every day. And it's really remarkable. Where do you think that drive comes from for you in terms of being a better business person? Because I think the art part came naturally to you.
Yeah, and I would say I have always relished a challenge. And to be honest, having your own business thing, it was just about the hardest thing I could think of, because I remember distinctly thinking, as I was in college and things, I bet I could be an accountant. I think I could do well at that. Okay.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, never mind then. I don't want to do it. But business is always challenging, relentless. Once you if you think you have it figured out, things change. So I think it's just deeply, deeply challenging. That's why I'm drawn to it.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy.
Yeah.
I'm just a glutton for punishment. That comes from inside.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are. I think you said at one point you're unemployable, or I read that or something.
I always say I'm unemployable.
I think we all are. So that's part of the challenge there. But and for your parents to buy that property and set you up like that, pretty cool. And so you're back there. It's like day one. Do you remember the first day you showed up for work in the garage? And was the name Motawi Tileworks from the day one?
The name was definitely not Motawi Tileworks. I think the only product I'd had commercial success with up to that point was Christmas ornaments.
Okay.
Which I had made with Celtic designs on them. And so it was the Celtic Clayworks.
No way.
Actually.
Oh, that was the name?
Yeah, that was my name. I had that on a couple of sheets of paper.
Yeah.
No, the thing I could make that people would buy was Christmas ornaments. But when I got the garage, and I was serious, I said, okay, now I can do anything I want. What kind of clay do I want to use? I have to decide. And I made a strategic decision right then that I'm really glad I did, to use one clay instead of 2 or 3 different kinds of clay like I've seen other people doing. So I wouldn't have clay contamination issues and all this stuff. I'm going to make all my tiles on one clay, and I'm going to go through glaze testing and see what these glazes that I think I like, what they look like on this clay in this firing situation. So I set out to essentially make a line of repeatable glazes. That was the plan, So I put together a whole, couple hundred probably different glaze colorant combinations, and came up with a set that I could repeat, and that's what I started trying to market.
Very scientific.
I had a plan about that.
Wow.
And early on I went to the International Tile and Stone Exposition. It's the international tile show that happens on American soil. It's called Coverings now, but back then, and it was in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I went there to learn, to see how to be in business, because I knew that Pewabic pottery had 100 years of history. So there's no way I couldn't really learn how to grow a business from them, because they're all on history and momentum and all this stuff, and I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I went to try to figure out how to be in the tile business, and there were 2 or 3 handmade makers there, and I talked their ears off. And I remember one lady who was talking about how you sell to architects. So I went to some of the conference talks, and afterwards I said, well, how do you do this? What do you do? She says, look, just decide how you want to be in business. How do you want to sell a project? And do that. I said, okay, So I decided, okay, I'm going to show, we have range samples. Basically, I'm going to art glazes are different from regular tile glazes because they're going to vary a lot, which is the point. Because we don't have that much control because we're not technical. But we can do things that the factories can't. So I made ranges that showed 3 different variations of the glaze. And that's how I sold a glaze color. And which is huge and critical because I'd seen that done badly a bunch of times, where you know it's really easy for someone to say, hey, here's the tile, and the customer could say, great, I want a fireplace full of things that look just like that. Okay. Well, in ceramics, just like that is not a thing unless you have a deeply stable process, which firing in electric kilns with the artist, it's not. It's just not a stable industrial process. And so, I still remember the first time I had a fireplace client in my garage, and she had seen me at the farmer's market, which was my first sales venue, which seems crazy, but it did work. And this visionary lady came in, and I showed her the range sample, and I asked her for $250 for a design deposit, non-refundable.
Yeah.
And she said yes. And inside I was going, what? Yes!
What? I'm getting a check right now.
And so, I designed it. I think I drew the design on legal paper, yellow, in a ballpoint pen or something.
Wow.
And she put down the non-refundable deposit after she saw the design, and I made the tile.
Wow.
And she loved it.
So I want to just go back for a second, because I'm trying to do the math in my head age-wise. I'm guessing you were in your 20s, your late 20s.
Yes.
Yeah, or something like that.
Something like that.
And that takes a lot of guts for you to go off to a design show like that, or an art show,
the exposition.
The expo,
yeah.
Sorry.
Giant.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm picturing McCormick Place in,
Exactly.
Is that where it was?
That's
in
where it
Chicago?
was.
And this gigantic thing. And you're going, here you are, this 20-year-old, kid with this business, that really is, you're just trying to figure things out in a garage, and you're walking around the expo, and yet you have the guts enough or the confidence enough to go speak with people and get into these conversations. Have you kept in touch with this one woman that you tell this story about by any chance?
The one that said just be in business?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
No, okay. It's interesting. She had quite an impact. That really stuck with you, because that must have been however long ago. Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was in 91.
91,
That was
okay.
even, just
So
the beginning of the
20 years
garage.
ago
That's
or
before we
whatever.
got the kiln on in the garage.
Yeah. And then this woman who, you had the confidence again to exhibit at the farmer's market, which I don't remember farmers markets back then, but right now I would think to myself, yeah, of course do that. But back then, that was probably ahead of the trends, bringing...
It might have been.
Yeah.
There was a jewelry maker.
Okay.
So
you
at the
hopped
Ann
in
Arbor
there.
farmers market, people did sell crafts. Of course.
Okay.
We didn't get the good spots. The farmers got the good spot.
And this woman finds you, and you end up setting a meeting with her to come to your garage. And do you remember? Do you keep in touch with her at all, or
A little bit, actually.
She was
So
like
I
your
remember
first
her very
client
well,
almost.
and she already had a history of having artists do work in her home.
Mm-hmm.
So she already had a kitchen backsplash by an artist up in northern Lower Michigan, where she used to live, I think. So when she built this place in Ann Arbor, she was comfortable with that process.
Okay.
However, so I don't know, 10 years later, she left Ann Arbor and built a house up in Boyne, and she had moved away from her Motawi, so she bought another one, a fireplace, pretty similar, the same glaze and all that stuff. And then one year we asked her, just for what we call a design story, tell us about doing the project. Well, then the story came out that she didn't really know. She went to this garage and it all seemed kind of iffy, and she didn't really know if she was going to get the tile.
Yeah.
But she, so she gave me the money and she actually got a project, but she was a little surprised.
She took a chance on you.
She totally took a
I'm
chance.
picturing this.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
picturing this woman
And I'm
saying,
just like, I'm just doing it,
Yeah.
They're going along with it. I'm keeping, this is what I want.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember how much that project was?
How much Oh.
It was like your first big sale.
Yeah. It was probably $1,500.
$1,500 back then, and it was around her fireplace.
It was her fireplace facade in her new condo. Yeah.
Was it beautiful?
I was really happy with it. And I don't multitask. If you believe in multitasking, I don't do it well.
Yeah.
And so when I get busy, the kiln might get a little hot before I turn it off. And so the glazes were kind of wild and crazy. I mean, it sort of fit that rangy range. It was all the way, this green to that green, the green with the brown. And she loved it.
Yeah.
And now, in a way, we're so much tighter with our process that we wouldn't make a project that's so crazy.
Yeah.
But that richness and variation of the glaze is just really, it's really beautiful.
I wonder who lives there now.
I don't know.
Do you think it's still, do you think they kept it?
I hope so.
Yeah. Could you go knock on their door?
Sure.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, because, and what was cute was that her next door neighbor in the duplex, it was a new duplex, saw her fireplace and said, hey, I want one of those.
Is that right?
That's how I got going. Yeah. So we made one for the next door neighbor, and then she also wanted her kitchen backsplash, so we did that. Mm-hmm. And then their designer said, hey, I want some of that, and so we made some for her. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of got it rolling, because the truth isn't, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how I was going to get into the business.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I wanted to do whole installations, but I didn't think anyone would buy them. So when I started the company in the garage and I was playing around, I was trying to make 4 1/4 inch tiles, which is the standard 4 1/4. Color tile used to be the company, the only tile company anyone ever heard of. And so I thought I would be making decoratives that you would just stick in place of one of those tile. So that's what I focused on, is just making things like that. But then when she came in and ordered a whole fireplace, and then I was like, damn, this is what I wanted to do. And it started happening.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And
my expenses were low.
Yeah, of course they were. Yeah, you were paying low rent. You had no employees. It was all you. You just had your clay and your supplies or whatnot. Yeah. And so can you remember when you started to get enough business where you thought to yourself, I need help?
Oh, yeah.
And how long was that?
It was very early. And not only did I need help, but I kind of needed company. Mm-hmm. I've learned this about myself now. I think when I'm talking and actually come up with ideas as I'm talking, which is really unfortunate for my staff because then they have to listen to me.
They need to be sounding boards.
And that's what I needed. And I had a brother coming out of college, didn't really know what he was going to do. And so he came and started working with me. And eventually, he was helping part-time, and eventually I said, will you work for me? And he said, well, I'll work with you. And so then we were working together in this company for a long time. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And so your brother came on, and then did you guys need more help at some point?
Yeah, after, by the time, in a couple of years, it was time to move out of the garage.
Okay.
We outgrew the garage. We got a hydraulic press instead of just our hands and hand press molds. And so we got a loan from the bank of mom and dad. And bought a hydraulic press, and the hydraulic press needed more room and another machine, and we were ready to make that leap. So we sold the house was sold, and I started paying rent to a landlord who wouldn't let me pay late.
Wiggle with it. Now that you're in the real world.
It was really, the place was really crummy though.
Was it in Ann Arbor as well?
It was just outside the city.
Okay.
Yeah, in Scioto Township, and it was not compliant with codes or anything like that, but it was okay. And we, I think of it now as the Stabler Road incubator, business incubator, because we moved from 600 square feet in the garage to 1,600 square feet.
Huge.
Where we could fit 2 kilns, and the press. And we started to have employees at that point. But really didn't know anything about managing or employing. neither one of us at the time. So that was a challenging period.
Yeah, there you go. Now business is getting real because you have people, humans around that aren't you or your brother.
Yeah.
So, and
we're making up the marketing. Printing is still really expensive. I didn't even know how to do that.
Yeah, how were you making sales? Where were they coming from?
So, we went to this, actually sales came to us. These establishments called tile showrooms started calling us. And so they were like a Virginia Tile that we know here in Detroit. So they buy tile from manufacturers and they sell it to the public. And some of it they stock and some of it they special order. So, of course, we were a special order line. But the one piece of marketing, of advertising I did is I had a black and white ad in Traditional Building Magazine, which is a trade magazine. I had literally, and so this little ad in there, and these tile showrooms started calling based on that, little black and white ad. And so I think by the time we ever went back to that big trade show, which we did, as a vendor and as a manufacturer, we were already selling to 20 stores, special order.
So it's interesting how business takes us down these different roads that we don't expect, because you were marketing to one type of potential customer and a different one kind of picked it up, and now I guess you would be in the wholesale business at that point, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, you're self-distributing your wholesale, and then I was also still trying to do art fairs where I make a pretty, a pretty tile, not a flat tile, and sell it as an art piece, and that business kind of waxed and waned until we discovered, until we started making tile that looked like this with all these multiple colors, because we used to just do relief tile. And that's, it didn't sell all that well. Since it was all we were selling at the time, it's, seemed okay.
Yeah.
But once we started making these, that took off and really changed what was going on.
So most people will be listening to this, although we have it on video.
Sorry.
So go to the video if you want to see what she's talking about. But no, maybe just do a quick description.
So the kind of artistic tile I started doing was essentially a bas relief, spelled BAS-RELIEF, a sculpture. It was just a really low sculpture, like on a coin, but a little bit taller. So the glaze just fills in around those areas, and the design shows through really beautifully. At Motawi Pottery, they call them the embossed tile. And so I did a lot of those with lots of Celtic designs on them. And that's what I took to art fairs for the first few years, and what I tried to sell to galleries. And it didn't sell that well, and so I abandoned that market, actually. So we were working on these installation tiles and with these showrooms and, just homeowners coming at us wanting an installation. But then my brother actually sold a multicolored piece. We kind of made one experimentally. Actually, I think maybe he even just described the idea to a customer, and he sold it.
I like that.
When I wasn't around, because that was most of the salesman. There's some beautiful vision on his part. And he says, I sold this, now we get to make it. And it was an image of these pine trees, which now it's been our best-selling decorative series ever since, basically. So then we started to get into what I now call the polychrome tile, multicolored tile, where the design is sort of etched out in a little raised line of clay, and then the colors go in between the lines. And that's been very, very successful. And with that product, then I went back to art fairs, and I tried to sell to galleries again, and that work was successful.
I see. And so as things were progressing, was the direct-to-consumer or business, direct-to-business model, or I'm just going to call it the wholesale model, because when I think of the Virginia Tile companies, they're reselling your products. So was one doing better than the other? Was there one that you were focusing on?
Yeah, I was still exploring all of them. I still say we sell our tile any way we can, honey.
You still say that?
I still do.
I love it.
But the truth is, so the wholesale, I call it the architectural tile, the plain tiles that you make the projects out of, we went really deep in that direction. And it was kind of a fun business. It was national. As the years went by, it became evident that actually we weren't making money at that, but it was providing just a lot of size. And the art tile business with the multicolored tiles was also growing nicely, and we were selling that in two ways, at art fairs, a little bit out of our own factory back door, and then also we were wholesaling that as well to gift shops and galleries and museum shops, things. So, and we were still making projects for people, designing fireplaces and kitchens and things. So we had a lot of different things going. 2 kinds of wholesale, a couple kinds of retail. This was pre-internet. And, actually, so I started to see that the wholesale installation tile business was a drag on profits. There were a lot of effort, a lot of problems. It took a lot of sort of work. And we were getting wholesale pricing. We were getting half. And so I started to look at that with a jaundiced eye. My business partner didn't share that view of that business. He really loved that business. And in 2009, when that whole, as 2008 came to a close and things were slowing down, and Bear Stearns, was it Lehman Brothers the first or Bear Stearns? When those banks failed, I was getting very concerned because from my perspective, the December 2008 was the Christmas that never came. The sales did not go up. Instead of selling and selling, I was dropping inventory. The shops stopped selling our stuff, and I was really worried. So I made a budget for 2009 that was really, contracting, and the showroom sales business dropped in half from 2008 to 2009 completely. So it was riding high. It was our biggest thing, and suddenly it was not. And so I was really glad we were differentiated, that we were selling into the art tile market, to the galleries, because that suffered too. The things that really didn't suffer were the things where we were selling our tile directly. So our project business, which I call it now, where we're designing the installation for the homeowner and making it, selling it directly, that actually kind of kept going.
Wow.
It just kept going. It had been growing, slowly but steadily, and that kept on.
Was it growing because it wasn't a measurable part of your business, and all of a sudden?
No, I was keeping track of my sales classes. From the beginning. Because I worked in bookkeeping at Pewabic Pottery.
Who knew?
After that
would come in handy.
Yeah, exactly. They kicked me out of the studio. That's another story. So I actually had a very good look at least where the sales were. So, a bunch of things happened right then. There was a big inflection in 2009 in the company. I looked and said, we have to get out of this showroom business. We really, actually in 2009, we did a big, I'm not sure how to talk about this, Rob, because there was a whole bunch of things that happened.
Start with the first.
So, at a certain point, back in 2008, I realized that my business partner and I had really different ideas about what we wanted the business to do and, the activities we wanted to engage in. And they were not compatible. And this is a pretty scary thought. So we started talking about how to end the partnership, and maybe if he could take one part of the business and I could take another part of the business, or how we could split it, or what we could do. And then the backdrop to that is that the economy did what it did. And I was really focused on saving the company at all. So we started talking, behind closed doors, that the employees didn't know, that we were kind of trying to work things out. went on for quite a while. By the end of 2009, okay? Well, actually, I'm going to backtrack a little. So the company did an amazing thing in February 2009. So, I was still making a budget by myself at the time. So I drew up a budget. Based on that budget, we let 4 people go because we knew we didn't need them.
And how many people were part of the company at that time?
Maybe 30, 35, something like that.
Okay.
We were pretty fat.
Okay.
A little too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we got into 2009, and about halfway through the month of February, I got back from a trade show and I looked at the numbers, and I was shocked because we were still 35% below plan. So there's no way we could keep spending at the rate we were. Otherwise, we'd run out of cash in a few months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not acceptable.
Right, of course.
So I went to, we did a whole Great Game of Business open book exercise right then and there. And so I went to the staff and said, here's the problem. Our sales are down 35%. We have to spend 35% less somehow, or we'll run out of cash and there will be no company. I said that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go find, so basically I said, if we can't save 35% on non-labor items, then we're going to have to do something with labor. And I don't want to lay anybody off. You're trained. I don't want to have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they had seen that I had already done it just, 2 months before.
Yeah.
And so I sent out a task force of people. We had, we shared every single line on the profit and loss statement, so shipping supplies and this and this and that. So everyone who spent on those lines got interviewed by part of our crack finance team. And the charge was, tell me how much you have to spend for 3 months. So we made a 3-month budget. You didn't know what was going to happen to the world. And I said, well, look at that budget, and whatever we can't make up in savings, I'll make a decision about labor. And oh, by the way, the 2 owners are taking a 25% pay cut off the top.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the backdrop. So they went through the exercise. It turns out we only had to short labor by 10%. So what I did was salary took 10% hit, and everyone else worked 10% less. So it was we shrunk hours for hourly folks.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't change their wage. And being the kind of people that these are, some people were living pretty much hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, and some were not. And so the folks that had a little more leeway basically gave their hours to the other folks.
Mm.
So I think people, everyone came through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And then it's at the end of 3 months, we were not in the clear yet. So we did the same exercise for another 3 months. And by the end of the 6th month, we were able to bring everyone on full time again. We didn't need everybody, but we were able to bring them on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at year end, we looked at our finances, and we had earned more money in 2009 than we had in 2008. The year of the biggest showroom sales and all that stuff, because we lost, and I think it's partly because we first of all, we cleaned. We got rid of a lot of fluffy expenses. Not that they were fluffy. I mean, storage trailer, office cleaning. They're things that we would eventually want back. Yeah. But we got abstemious, and the bottom line numbers were better.
Amazing.
Partly because I think of that big drag on revenue. That whole segment of the business dropped completely in half.
Mm-hmm. What a year.
Yeah, it was a crazy year. And so as that year was drawing to a close, my brother and I came to an agreement. Mm-hmm. The side of business that he really loved was the one that was really suffering. And so I ended up being able to, he sold me his half of the business, which was hard, really hard for him to do and for me to do. I mean, that whole thing was just hard and painful. Yeah. But, I knew that I wasn't living the life I wanted, because when that all precipitated, back in 2008, I came to this realization that work was really, really hard. And yet I dreaded going home because my home life was tough too. And I thought, this is crazy. I'm an entrepreneur in America. If there's anyone that can take control of their life.
So we just took a quick break because we had the water go absolutely flying. It was a blast, actually. We got a little sprinkled, which is hilarious. So, but you were talking about what it's, you said, I'm an entrepreneur, and if anyone could take control of this. So,
right. There's no excuse not to, to take care of your own life because you've got more control and more understanding of your control than any other human, really. And so I started to do that. Yeah. And I said, well, this business relationship isn't working. I need to start working on that. And well, the marriage is another whole story. Mm-hmm. But it's nice to be more self-aware now than I was then. Yeah. So as the year closed out, I had bought my brother's share of the business, and was starting the hard task of sort of earning the trust of my staff anew, because the business was really different now. But it was much easier for me to operate it independently. And I did miss my sounding board though. So I had a few things to learn about how I work myself. But I was really happy with the challenge of it's just your brains against the world. Mm-hmm. And there's no, there's not a boss man, which I never wanted in the first place. So it was never me against the man. Mm-hmm. It's just me against the world, and the world is ambivalent. And I like that challenge. Mm-hmm. Nobody's really pushing at you. I didn't think I had any, government forces pushing against me, other than, normal. Right. So I like that challenge. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I was unhappy with my marriage, and I ended that right around the same time too. So it was a whole new Noel. Yeah. Starting when I turned 45, and as 2010 dawned, I had a whole different set of challenges, and a set that I could dig into and enjoy.
Was the strain of the business part of the strain on your marriage? I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it was.
I mean, were you not showing up the way you needed to for that relationship?
Oh, heck no. No, I was stressed all the time, and I was taking, my angst and my stress out in probably all directions. Mm-hmm. Very much so. Not a very aware person at the time. I still had that 10x power. Yeah. But I was nowhere near understanding that at work. So, I definitely tromped on lots of feelings, on both sides of that. Mm-hmm.
Was there any correlation to the fact that you ended a business partnership and your marriage kind of in the same time frame? Were you thinking, I just want to get this all over with? Like, I don't want to spend 2 more years in my marriage and then like, things are bad, let's just get all the bad done and so I can move forward? Or
there were a couple things. When you have trouble in a marriage, it brews for a while. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't just give up that easy. Yeah. And so there were things that had happened where I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to go do this thing together. How am I going to get through this? A year goes by. I realized I was at that same point. Yeah. Oh, we're going to do this thing. How am I going to get through this? You really shouldn't allow yourself to go through this again.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had that going, and this is a really strange sort of fiscal thing, but I had a prenuptial agreement, and the prenup said, what's yours is yours and mine is mine, including the Tileworks and all that, but it had an expiration. So what I could see was that if I didn't get out of the marriage before the expiration of the prenup, I would have to buy half of my business again. And from an even tougher negotiator, because my husband negotiates for a living.
He's an attorney.
He's a really smart guy. He's not an attorney. He's a financial guy. Okay. Moreover, he's the corporate treasurer for big companies. So
you knew what you were up against.
Boy, did I. Yeah. And I said, I can't have that happen.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wasn't going to stay in the marriage. And I think every night after we closed the Tileworks sale deal, for 7 nights I didn't sleep. And on the 8th night I said, okay, this is done.
It's done.
Yeah.
And was it amicable?
No, it was painful.
Okay. Well,
I mean, we agreed to do it. Yeah. You know, we had a child who we both loved very much.
Yeah.
And so I mean, we worked it all out. It was a little complicated on the financial side. Because of the Tileworks and all that. But
your son was around like 10 or something at the time?
Yeah.
And is your son named after your mom?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's cool. So my child has 3 last names. My mother's last name, which is Kitson, Kitson.
Yeah.
My last name, Motawi, and my ex-husband's last name, which is Dong, Dong.
Yeah.
He's from his folks were Chinese.
Yeah.
So my child is this beautiful half and half.
I've seen a picture of him. He's beautiful. And I was thinking about the all the different background that he has in him, you know, because he has your Egyptian, he has your American, and your husband's your ex-husband was Chinese. Yeah. So he's got all of that in him. How has that shown up for him as he's grown up, or has it, you know?
Well, you know,
because he's in college now.
He's in college now, so he's a formed person.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I can definitely see, you know, the parts of him that are straight from his father and from me. You know, he's concerned about time, which is from his dad, because I'm freewheeling with time. you know, and he likes to have things. You know, so you know, when he's getting ready to go someplace, if he feels like he's late, he's really upset.
Okay.
That is not a good time.
Yeah.
So don't make him late, because it'll be a stressor. So there's a couple things like that, and so in some ways he's more disciplined and organized than me. Thank goodness. But he's, you know, I mean, we're both smart people.
Yeah.
My ex and I. So he's got a fairly shrewd mind, and he's definitely got, I would say, my brothers are. He's got this nice groundedness about him. My son does, where he can see the. You know, he doesn't seem to have the same like need to fit in and feel like he doesn't that I had in high school. It's just much more grounded. He can say, "Oh yeah, that's so and so's posse over there. They're into being, you know, whatever they are. And they're all into their, you know, their rich houses and their cars and all that, and that's not my thing."
Yeah.
So he's really grounded. Yeah.
Congratulations on, you know, because you had a very influential time in his life, 10 years old, to have your parents be divorced. And I was 8 when my parents were divorced. So, you know, I remember that really well. And it's a challenging time when your parents are divorced like that. And you're having to go back and forth between two houses and things like that. So he appears to have grown into, and I've heard about him over the years. So it's been fun to kind of see him grow up from the peripheral. And, you know, one thing that stuck my mind back on the business side of things was when you had that stress point in 08, or I think it was 08, where you opened up the books and you started doing open book finance. Were you aware of open book finance before through the Great Game of Business process, which is a great book for those of you that don't know about it? And were you holding off on doing it, and this stress point was kind of like, we got to do something, we're doing this?
I definitely knew about the Great Game, and I think I had already been to the Great Game conference even.
You had, okay.
And so I was aware of it. You know, my business partner and I didn't see eye to eye on opening those books.
Yeah.
But, you know, with the company at stake, you know, that was the solution.
Yeah.
To me, that was the obvious solution, and he worked with it, and it, you know, it worked beautifully. Yeah, and after that, it still wasn't quite the right time to open the books. So I was delighted, you know, a little bit later when we were looking at a cusp point where I saw that people would actually be wanting open book.
Yeah.
So now we do run open books, and we have for 3 years. But there was an event that I looked at where, at a certain point, employees were saying, "Hey, you know, there's no raise in this budget for me.
Yeah.
And I was saying, hey, I couldn't see how to make it happen because I was still doing it all myself.
Mm-hmm.
No one was walking in my shoes.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, okay, we're all going to make the budget together. And, you know, budget yourself a raise. Let's figure it out. Let's do something that seems real. And, you know, of course, people want to be conservative on on their sales projections. And they can't be, you know, the expenses kind of are what they are. I mean, a lot of stuff is kind of fixed and normal. We weren't actually extravagant. But it didn't matter that you're not extravagant. If you can't make some money, then you got to change.
Yeah.
So with the help of my newest bookkeeper, Michelle Oliar, who came to that position, I'd say in 2015, she really, I advertised for a person to run my books. The position was called Counter and Explainer of Money.
I love that title.
Yes. And because I had a great counter, but that person was really used to doing things according to generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that person's idea of GAAP was not the same as my idea of how I understand a business. And I couldn't, you know, I was unable to get that person to give me the kinds of reports I needed to see how the business was doing. So for a couple of years there, 12, 13, 14, I didn't see the books as clearly as I had the entire rest of the history of the company. And and that's why we weren't making headway. You know, they would say, oh, you know, you're not expending too much. And then finally I realized it doesn't matter what you think if we're spending too much. You know, that we're not. We just have to change.
Yeah.
And so when Michelle came on, she has this amazing ability to read my mind and understand what kind of financial information I need to make a decision. So then, you know, at that point we threw open the books. She explained to everyone, here's how you spend on your expense line. So we did line ownership and all these standard things. Yeah. And we actually put in place the same bonus program that Jack Stack outlines in The Great Game of Business with the quarterly bonuses and all that business.
Yeah.
And that served us very well.
When you guys were doing it quarterly during the tough time and it was helping, you ended up doing well that one year. How come you didn't keep doing it?
I'm not sure. At the time,
Fair
you know?
answer.
Yeah, I think, you know, my sister was working for me at the time. I had an awful lot of family involved in the business at one time. You know, my brother, my brother's wife, my sister, my cousin. Okay. And it just didn't, it was nowhere near the right time. Okay. Yeah, believe me, I'd thought about it. And you know, even after my siblings stopped being in charge of the money, I couldn't, you know, my force of will, and I couldn't make it happen.
What I'm hearing is there were dynamics at play.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So.
Exactly, and I tend to do a thing, and you know, I'm sexist against my own gender in a way. Yeah. Because there were men in positions that, you know, had ways of doing things, and I didn't like it, but I couldn't overcome. It's like, you know, they're doing good things. They may not have been exactly what I wanted, but I couldn't refute that they were good. And so when those people stopped being with the company, and there were people that I felt like I could talk to better and really say, no, this is the way I want it. Then it changed. Yeah. So I don't mean to be sexist in my hiring or anything, but it turns out I work better with females a lot. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so it's, you know, there's some guys that work here. Yeah. And they're, you know. They stay away from you. Yeah. There's no wall. Go the other way. Run! You know what? It just, I'm very aware. Of that situation now. In myself.
One of the things from a business standpoint that you also have gotten a lot of recognition for is your adoption of how you go about manufacturing.
Oh, yes.
Which is so cool because, again, I go back to this artist's mind and all these beautiful tiles. Like when you walk into this place and we're in this room for, you know, those that are listening that has all these beautiful tiles all over the wall, and yet I've been through numerous times your manufacturing operation, and it's really fantastic. So explain kind of how that all came about and how you guys do it.
Sure. So there was another inflection point.
Usually there are.
So there was a bit of a recession 2001,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as we came out of that in 2002, I was looking at how we were doing financially, and I thought, wow, this is not what I want. We've got a little bit of a reputation. The company's 10 years old. People are talking about Motawi, but it's not really translating to much income. And I wasn't happy with it. So, I was talking to my business partner at the time, and I said, hey, we got to do something. And he said, I will research lean manufacturing. And so he did. And what he discovered was that a book had just come out called The Toyota Way, written by Jeffrey Liker. Jeffrey Liker lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a professor at University of Michigan. And so my brother called him up and said, can we talk, have lunch, do something? And the guy said, I'm coming out to visit you, and I'm bringing someone special.
Yeah.
Well, who he brought was a PhD candidate named Eduardo Lander. And Eduardo had posited that you could use Toyota-style production in a completely opposite environment. So, in other words, he was saying you can use Toyota-style production in a high variability, like lots of different kinds of parts, low volume manufacturing situation. And of course, car companies opposite, they make thousands of the same thing.
Yeah.
And that was what he posited, and that's what he needed to prove. But he needed case studies in order to do that, and he was having trouble finding case studies.
Oh, wow. That's so great.
And so we said, we will do
These
whatever
stars
you
aligned.
say. Exactly.
Wow.
And the hitch was we had to do what he suggested.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of it was, it was counter to, I don't believe in common sense anymore. After getting married, you and your spouse don't have the same thing. And,
Yeah.
Toyota business practice for me, you might want to call it, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not common sense. It's a learned set of ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came in and we did what he said, and not everything worked, but a lot of things did, especially the Kanban system
Yeah.
that we use to great effect and really successfully now has been, it's like the single biggest piece of methodology other than, than completely changing the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was, a nice artist doing my best, and we were making lists of things and trying to get orders out. I mean, we were trying to do business really well,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't become manufacturers until we learned that.
Yeah.
And now, after that, we understood how long it took us to make things, what our actual production capacity was, so we had a much more clear understanding of what was going on in our own manufacturing. Because we used to have, it felt busy, right? We had 14 weeks of orders sitting on the shelf, partially made, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
And not at all. So now we maintain a stock,
Yeah.
a limited, tightly controlled stock of everyday products. And we're able to make what we need when we need it.
And there's a great video on, I think you could probably find it on YouTube, where you actually, are walking around the facility and showing the Kanban system.
Right.
So check that out if you're curious on more information on how they do that here at Motawi. And I feel like when I'm listening to you, there's a great connection to open book finance, because when you say things like we had 14 weeks of inventory, I'm thinking, well, that's cash that's not in your bank because it's sitting hoping to be sold. And now you're so much more of a, I don't know if it's quite just in time, but it's more timely,
Yeah.
right?
Well, part of what we're doing a couple different things with that system. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, I want to say, beliefs that overlap into how we do things.
Yeah.
So not only do we, we don't have more stock than we need, and we're making the right things at the right time because of the Kanban system. I have a belief in full employment. I don't want to have people furloughed. It's not, it's not part-time now and overtime here.
Yeah.
That's not how I want to run the business. That's not how I want to treat the people. So because I want level employment, I'm willing to use inventory as kind of a buffer So when we actually plan our whole, clearly we do a financial plan and we do it 12 months in advance. And we actually set our production targets at the beginning of the year. There will be an average. And we're going to grow. I mean, we're always growing a little bit. So basically, it's the average we need for the entire year, including Christmas. So right now, we're sitting here in January.
Right.
And, Christmas is far away. But for the fourth quarter, we will sell more than we can possibly make. And so I actually set the Kanban levels, the inventory levels, at a place where there's enough room in there to fill them up, really quite full in the first part of the year. And then for the second part of the year, we end up using that tile, and we can't make it as fast as we can sell it. And so that inventory kind of bottoms out by the end of the year.
Okay. So it keeps everybody on a steady employment.
That's the idea.
I like that.
If you guess right.
Yeah.
And if you're hitting your targets.
Which is business.
So of course.
As much as we like it to be scientific, it isn't always that way.
No, it's your best guess.
It is.
And sometimes, in January when it's kind of slow, it doesn't feel like you need to, do I really need that extra person right now? Well, yeah. We should have had him. So right now, everyone's really clear on why we need to make as much tile now as we were in December.
One other thing that you did that I remember thinking that was a really interesting business move that she just did, and that is you actually acquired your clay supplier a certain number of years ago. So what was going on there?
So, I mean, I've been using the same clay supplier all the time, as well as a lot of us in Southeast Michigan, professionals, schools, K-12, universities, and they were going to close. So he came to me one day, and I thought I was going to get to complain about quality. And he says, this company is going to close, and I'm here to talk to you about making sure that you always have a clay supply. And boy, oh boy. Now, I thought I was doing due diligence, but I really didn't know. And I thought I knew business, but I didn't know that business. Anyway, I knew vertical integration, owning your supplier was a smart move business-wise, and that clay making company sold to a lot of other makers, in Michigan. So I bought it. It was a pure inventory purchase sale. Yeah. It's not a high margin business or anything like that. So I bought it and I moved it to Ann Arbor, and knowing that you can get your clay and that you're in control of it is priceless. So I don't know how to value that. It turned out to be a giant business challenge, because the drivers in that business are completely different. Inventory is a really big deal because you're trucking in full truckloads you basically buy full truckloads of dirt, mix it with water, and then ship out the mud. Wow. In smaller, in a pallet at a time or a bag at a time. Yeah. So inventory really matters. You've got to have the right dirt in-house to make the right mud.
Makes sense.
Essentially.
I love it.
That's what that company does.
Yeah.
So it's been great to not worry about my supply. I never lose a minute of sleep over it anymore. That challenge. So running that company profitably is a really different kind of challenge. Yeah. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm glad I did
glad you did it.
There, but it's not an unqualified, it's like the child that's the tricky one, right?
Doesn't come without its headaches. Did your mom ever come to the shop here?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Now, you were awarded, I think, last year by the Small Business Association, the Small Business Women-Owned Business
Women-Owned Business of the Year in Michigan. Yeah.
Did your mom know that?
Of course.
What did she say when she hears that?
Well, she was delighted. I'm so proud of you. I mean, that's what she says. Yeah. My mom she doesn't jump up and down, But I know that made her really happy, and my dad was alive at the time, so I invited my mom and my parents and a bunch of senior staff people to the gala, so we could all be celebrating together. Of course, that's not an award for yourself; it's an award for the company.
Of course.
So, I mean, it feels really great. People have no idea what you really do of the struggles, and and I remember when I was talking to my staff people about applying for this award, I said, "Oh, we'll never get that." And my the person who thought we should sign up for it said, "I'll take that challenge any day." And so she was laughing and smiling and saying, "I told you."
Similarly, what was it like when you received news that you were one of 25 companies that were recipients of the Forbes Small Giants recognition? One of 25 companies in the entire country.
Okay.
And what a picture.
Completely different. I know.
So cool. And like the news raced out to talk to you too.
Yeah.
That was really neat. But anyway, what was that like?
There's no comparison. There's nothing I'm prouder of than being named a small giant. I've known Bo for a long time. You know what? I seriously, I had a glow.
Bo Burlingham's the author of the book Small Giants, so you've known the author for a long time. So you had a glow.
Yeah, and I've been drinking the Kool-Aid. I've been working on those ideas and thinking about them and caring about those kinds of ideas for a long time. Because they know the kind of, the Small Giants, my colleagues in that organization have a little clear idea of what I'm up against, what my struggles have been. And if Bo Burlingham and the editors of Forbes and the people over there think what I'm doing is that great, then those are some people I whose opinion I really respect. But I mean, I'm a little more of a humble person anyway, so it's
pound your chest.
Yeah, I know. And well, I'm not so good at that. I think the moment that really hit me, I mean, because Bo had said, "Oh, I think you should apply for this thing," and so we were named. But it didn't hit me until I saw all the other names of the other companies on the list. Then I said, "Whoa, wait. We're not like those guys. They're really great companies. This is, what am I in?" And then I went, okay, so that's what amazed me. I said, oh boy, okay, we'll try to be good.
Well, it's not a simple process to go through for the Forbes recognition, and so you are as good as every one of those on the list. And so it is always nice to have that sort of verified by an outside source that has a lot of credibility in that Forbes and Bo and the group that goes through the process. It's pretty neat, and you deserve it. I've seen the company grow over the years, and the culture and the type of leadership that you've brought to the company has been really outstanding, and that's why you guys are so successful. I mean, your products stand on their own, so you got stuff to sell. That's great. Now, what's it like to be here? And you're changing people's lives, and that's one of the things that we get to do as entrepreneurs and leaders, is if we do it the right way and in a mindful way, we get to change some lives. You mentioned, I read somewhere, and I think there's a theme here as I listen to you talk, that you always honor your feelings, or you think it's important to honor your feelings. And I felt like that you've done that since you were young.
I feel like there was a point when I really saw it, and it was while I was on that crazy bus school. I realized afterwards, but a year after that experience, I got some perspective on it from another person who had been kind of in the same program, but the next year. I realized that there were a bunch of things that were bubbling that I didn't talk about in that group. And everything about that experience for me and the other people would have been better if I had. And so I feel like every year I learn anew. Trust your gut, trust your gut, trust your gut. Because there were choices I made and things that I felt that I didn't talk about that were sort of in opposite direction of maybe the way the group was going. So I'm getting better and better at trusting myself. But, you know, it's funny. The whole small giants thing, if you're a perfectionist, you're never quite good enough, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't spend time thinking about how great things are and how good the company might be doing. I'm, of course, always focused on, well, we got to do this, we got to do this. There's a bunch of things we need to do better. And that's where my mind always is. So there's an interesting, you know, you've got to balance the competition, perfectionism with some mindfulness about what's gone on that's really good. And trusting my gut.
Yeah, you do.
So I feel like over the years I've gotten more and more evidence. You know, and the bigger the stakes, the more I need to trust me.
Yeah.
Even when things go the other way. Because I actually love, you know, if there's an idea that's opposite the mainstream, I gravitate to it immediately. In almost all ways.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. It's almost a knee-jerk thing. You know, conventional wisdom,
Yeah.
what else you got?
I can appreciate that, though, for sure. There's something to that.
You know, I also read somewhere, you know, about going against the grain, or you use an analogy about a dance partner, and you're an avid dancer, and you know, if you want to get out of your comfort zone, you know, go and have somebody else lead while you're dancing. So what did you mean by that?
Oh, well, so the dancing that I love to do is partnered dancing,
Yeah.
where there's a leader and a follower, and the leader is generally a male, right? And I love to be the follower in partner-led dances because I don't have to plan anything. And I can't, and if I start to think too much, it really gets in the way. It's a pure reaction. And it's just really interesting to me because the little clues that you get as a dance follower are just a little weight here, a nudge there, something. They're all very subtle, and your reactions are in the nanoseconds. You know, people say, "How can you're doing it right together?" Well, he's initiating it, but I'm following pretty quick. I just love that process because it's nothing to do with planning or thinking or anything. It's just reacting, and there's some nice magic in there, which doesn't happen in the rest of life.
Yeah.
And it's an unmindfulness. I don't know.
Yeah.
But when the music is really great and the partners' communications are clear,
Yeah.
nonverbal, of course, that's when I just go into this that's my nirvana.
Yeah, well, actually, I think that's very mindful because you've taken the intentionality maybe of really trying to feel and be in the moment and just allow it to be, and that's like the ultimate is whenever we can get there and just that's like almost like flow, you know, and that's as deep as it gets.
Yeah, it would be much easier if I could just go to a mountaintop by myself. Instead, I need like a really good band and a ballroom and partners and people.
These are the lessons that we are presented in our lives, right? Do you have a go-to book that you know you've used over the years that you kind of always go back to?
Yeah, I don't go very often, but it really is the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah.
I discovered it in college through my hippie boyfriend that scared my mom and dad so much. But in the end, I feel like there's mysteries and I don't pretend to know the answer, and I'm comfortable with the ambiguity. I don't know what's going to happen to us. You know, we got death and taxes, right? So that I get. But I don't know, and I'm comfortable not knowing. And there's a line in there, they talk about the 10,000 things rise and fall, like all the little concerns of the people, and do your socks match? Is your hair good? Is this or that? Did someone cut in line? All that stuff is just stuff.
Yeah.
And you can step away and just realize there's not that much that's more important than being kind I'm not saying I do that easily either, because I'm
Sure.
excited and ambitious and
Yeah.
perfectionist. So, even that, it takes work to just relax and realize that the things don't matter more than people's feelings.
Mhm. That's beautiful. Yeah, really is. Thank you for doing this.
You're very welcome.
I'm so grateful to you.
No, I'm grateful to you. We can both be grateful.
Okay, that's fair. I called you this week, or I sent you a text this weekend. You called me, and you were thinking it through, but you agreed to it, and I'm the beneficiary of that. So thank you for inviting us here.
You're welcome.